Most people give up on container gardening without realizing the problem was never the containers. It was the plants. Almost every container video online is built around annuals, plants designed to die. Nobody told you a better system exists. There is a category of perennials so perfectly matched to pot life that some of them bloom harder and perform more reliably in containers than they ever would in the ground. 20 plants. 0 replanting. A garden that builds itself year after year. Subscribe if you want a low-maintenance landscape that looks better in year 3 than it did in year 1. That is exactly what this channel covers. Stay with me, because number 15 surprises every experienced gardener, and number 17 will permanently change how you think about containers. Let's get into it. Plant 1. Lavender. Zones 5 through 8. Most gardeners assume lavender struggles in pots. The opposite is true. Lavender is native to rocky, dry Mediterranean hillsides, shallow soil, sharp drainage, full sun. That is precisely what a container naturally creates. In heavy garden soil, poor drainage is lavender's single biggest killer. In a pot, that problem disappears entirely. For cold climates, choose English lavender. Hidcote and Munstead are the 2 varieties worth knowing. Compact, cold hardy, and built for long-term container life. They will return every spring from a single planting for up to 10 years. Maintenance is almost nothing. Water deeply once the top 2 inches of soil are dry. Cut back by 1/3 after the first bloom flush. That is genuinely it. Lean soil, occasional neglect. This plant rewards you for doing less. Next up is the perennial that works as drought insurance, even when you leave it alone for 2 full weeks. Plant 2. Echinacea, also called coneflower. Zones 3 through 9. This is one of the most underused container perennials available, and the reason is a misconception. People assume it needs a large garden bed. It does not. Compact varieties like Magnus and Powwow White were specifically bred for smaller growing spaces and perform beautifully in any container 12 inches or wider. What makes Echinacea exceptional for low-maintenance containers is its taproot. That deep root is the plant's drought insurance. Once established, typically after the first full growing season, Echinacea pulls moisture from deep in the pot while the surface looks completely dry. This is the plant you can leave for a 2-week vacation without arranging a single watering. Here is the layer most videos skip entirely. Leave some seed heads standing through fall and winter. Goldfinches and chickadees will visit your container regularly to feed. A dormant pot that feeds wildlife all winter. That is value most gardeners never think to build. The next plant takes low maintenance even further. This one essentially waters itself. Plant 3. Sedum, also called stone crop. Zones 3 through 9. If there is one perennial built specifically for the person who forgets to water, it is sedum. It stores moisture directly inside its thick, fleshy leaves, a succulent in everything but name. It will sit in a dry container for weeks without the kind of stress that causes lasting damage. For containers, focus on the upright, autumn-blooming varieties. Autumn Joy, Matrona, and Purple Emperor build through spring and summer as tight architectural mounds, then explode into flat-topped flower clusters in late summer and fall, exactly when most other containers are fading. Those flower heads then dry to a rich copper brown and hold their structure through winter. The practical comparison is worth stating clearly. Most container annuals need water every 1 to 2 days in summer heat. Sedum needs water once a week in summer, once every 2 to 3 weeks in cooler weather. Over a full season, that difference in time and effort is enormous. Next is a plant that solves all-season color in spots that barely see the sun. Plant 4. Heuchera, also called coral bells. Zones 4 through 9. Most container perennials demand full sun. Heuchera is the answer for every spot that does not have it. It performs beautifully in just 2 to 4 hours of direct sun. North-facing entrances, covered porches, sheltered courtyards. This opens an entire category of low-maintenance container gardening that most other plants simply cannot fill. The foliage alone justifies growing it. Colors range from lime green to deep burgundy, to near black to caramel gold, often with metallic or marbled patterning. Unlike flowering plants, that color is present every single day of the season, not just during the 2 or 3 weeks a plant happens to be in bloom. Here is what most videos miss. Heuchera's biggest enemy in garden beds is crown rot from winter moisture sitting at the base. In a well-draining container, that problem is largely eliminated. Container-grown Heuchera frequently outlives its in-ground counterparts for exactly this reason. The next plant is the one that surprises even experienced gardeners, and the reason is biological. Plant 5. Agapanthus, also called Lily of the Nile. Zones 7 through 11, with hardy varieties tolerating down to 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Here is the counterintuitive fact that almost no gardening video explains clearly. Agapanthus blooms more prolifically when its roots are slightly pot-bound. This is documented botanical behavior, not folklore. When roots have filled a container and become lightly compressed, the plant redirects energy away from root expansion and toward flower production. A container-grown agapanthus that has been in the same pot for 2 or 3 years without repotting will often produce more flower stems than a freshly planted specimen in open ground. The flowers are extraordinary. Tall stems rising up to 3 feet above strap-like foliage, topped with spherical clusters of tubular blue or white flowers in mid to late summer. 3 matching containers flanking an entrance or pathway looks like professional landscape design. And the rule is simple: do not repot it until roots are visibly escaping the drainage holes. The constraint is the performance driver. Next is the perennial with the longest bloom window on this entire list, 5 to 6 months of continuous flowers without deadheading. Plant 6. Hardy geranium, specifically the Roseanne variety. Zones 4 through 8. This is not the tender annual pelargonium that most people call a geranium. That plant is a different species entirely, and confusing the two has cost gardeners years of unnecessary replanting. The true hardy geranium is a genuinely perennial plant that returns every year, spreads attractively in containers without becoming invasive, and blooms with almost no intervention. Roseanne is the variety worth knowing. It produces violet-blue flowers continuously from late spring, right through the first frost, with no deadheading required. Most perennials give you 2 to 3 weeks of flowers. Roseanne gives you 5 to 6 months. The trailing habit is an additional advantage in containers. Plant it at the edge of a pot, and it will cascade gently over the rim, producing flowers at the tips of the trailing stems throughout the entire season. It softens the container edge, adds depth to the composition, and provides constant color, all from a plant that asks for almost nothing in return. Next is a perennial that most container videos either misidentify or replace with a weaker substitute, and its pollinator value is remarkable. Plant 7. Salvia nemorosa, also called woodland sage. Zones 4 through 8. This distinction matters, and most gardening content does not make it clearly enough. Salvia nemorosa is not culinary sage. It is not the tender annual salvia sold as a bedding plant. It is a hardy, long-lived ornamental perennial, and it is one of the best container performers available. The varieties worth knowing are Caradonna, Maynite, and Marcus. All 3 produce dense spikes of deep violet or purple flowers that are genuinely irresistible to bees and butterflies. After the first bloom flush, cut the spent spikes back by half, and the plant typically produces a strong second flush in late summer, essentially doubling its value in one season. In a container, its compact root system and drought tolerance are genuine assets. It does not need large volumes of soil. It does not need frequent watering, and its deep purple flower color is one of the most versatile in container design. It pairs beautifully with silver foliage, warm orange and red tones, and clean white flowers in mixed plantings. Next is the one element most container displays are completely missing, and once you add it, everything around it looks intentional. Plant 8. Dwarf ornamental grasses, zones 4 through 9. Flowering plants give you color. Grasses give you something. No flowering plant can year-round movement. The way the blades respond to the slightest breeze gives a container display a dynamic quality that rigid plants cannot replicate. For containers, 3 varieties are worth knowing. Blue fescue stays compact at 8 to 10 inches, produces steel blue foliage that contrasts beautifully against almost any neighboring plant, and is extremely drought-tolerant once established. Hamelin dwarf fountain grass reaches 18 to 24 inches and produces feathery plumes from late summer through winter that catch light in a way few plants can match. Prairie dropseed is the third option. Fine-textured, airy, and exceptionally low maintenance. A dwarf grass placed at the center or rear of a mixed container creates the vertical element that makes the entire arrangement look professionally designed. One grass in a pot elevates everything planted around it. Annual maintenance is minimal, cut back to within a few inches of the base in late winter before new growth emerges. Next is the plant that creates conversation, torch-like flowers that look tropical but handle cold better than you expect. Plant 9. Kniphofia, also called red-hot poker. Zones 5 through 9. Few perennials create a visual statement as dramatic as Kniphofia. Tall, torch-like flower spikes in combinations of red, orange, yellow, and cream that look exotic and almost tropical, despite the fact that many varieties are cold-hardy to Zone 5. For containers, focus on the dwarf varieties. Little Maid, the Popsicle series, and Tawny King all stay at 18 to 36 inches, rather than the 4 to 5 feet of standard species. In a container, one well-established Kniphofia in full bloom is a stronger visual statement than an entire mixed annual planting. Here is the container advantage most videos miss entirely. Gardeners in zones 5 and 6 who have never successfully overwintered Kniphofia in the ground often find that container growing solves the problem completely. Instead of trying to mulch and protect an in-ground planting, you simply move the pot to a sheltered location for winter. The portability of the container eliminates the zone limitation. Next is the perennial that brings hummingbirds directly to your patio and blooms for 8 to 12 weeks without stopping. Plant 10. Penstemon. Zones 3 through 9. Penstemon is one of the best-kept secrets in low-maintenance container perennial growing. The reason it stays a secret is that garden center labeling rarely highlights its most important feature: drought tolerance, which is precisely what makes it exceptional for pots. Once established, Penstemon is one of the most drought-tolerant flowering perennials available in temperate climates. The tubular flowers come in shades from white through pink, red, purple, and near black, produced on tall spikes above compact foliage mounds. Bloom period runs 8 to 12 weeks in most varieties, significantly longer than the 2 to 3 week flush most perennials deliver. The detail no competing video adequately covers is the wildlife value. Hummingbirds are strongly attracted to Penstemon's tubular red and pink varieties. If you are growing containers on a patio or deck, a Penstemon in bloom will reliably bring hummingbirds within arm's reach of your outdoor living space. That is a benefit money genuinely cannot fully replicate. Next is the plant most commonly mislabeled in garden centers, and that labeling mistake has cost gardeners years of unnecessary expense. Plant 11. Dianthus, also called garden pinks, zones 3 through 9. Most gardeners treat Dianthus as an annual because that is how it is sold in bedding plant sections of garden centers. The perennial varieties are cold-hardy to Zone 3 in many cases, and the confusion between annual and perennial Dianthus cost gardeners years of replanting money unnecessarily. The plants stay compact, most varieties topping out at 8 to 12 inches, but they produce an extraordinary number of flowers relative to their size, often with a clove fragrance that punches well above what you would expect from something so small. 2 varieties are worth prioritizing. Firewitch won the Perennial Plant of the Year designation and earns it with exceptional heat and drought tolerance. The Kahori series produces salmon pink flowers with a strong clove fragrance over an extraordinarily long bloom period. A. Container Dianthus protected from extreme winter wet, the primary killer, will return for 5 or more years from a single planting. Stop replacing it every spring. Next is a plant that gets more beautiful the less you water it, and messier the more you do. Plant 12. Achillea, also called yarrow. Zones 3 through 9. Yarrow is one of the toughest perennials in temperate gardens, and almost nobody puts it in a container, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. The flat-topped flower clusters come in shades from white to pale yellow to deep gold to terracotta to crimson. Fresh yarrow flowers are intensely colored. As they age, they fade to softer antique tones that are often more beautiful than the original color. Then they dry in place, holding their structure through fall and winter as a natural dried arrangement inside the container. The counterintuitive maintenance rule is the key insight here. Underwatering keeps yarrow compact, structural, and beautiful. Overwatering produces the lanky, falling-over growth that gives it an undeserved reputation for messiness. It evolved on dry, rocky hillsides. It is biologically programmed for the conditions a neglected container naturally creates. Water less. Get a better plant. Next is a plant almost nobody thinks to put in a container. But in a hanging basket in early spring, it becomes something that stops people in their tracks. Plant 13. Creeping phlox. Zones 3 through 9. Most gardeners know creeping phlox as a ground cover. Almost nobody thinks to put it in a hanging basket. That single decision transforms it into one of the most visually dramatic container plants in early spring. In a hanging basket or tall container where the trailing stems can cascade downward over the edges, creeping phlox explodes into a solid carpet of tiny flowers in pink, white, lavender, or deep magenta, often before almost any other plant is showing color. The flowers completely obscure the foliage beneath. A hanging basket in full bloom looks like a ball of solid color suspended in the air. There is nothing subtle about it. After blooming, the tight evergreen foliage provides year-round structure in the container. A light shearing after bloom keeps the plant compact and prevents it from becoming woody in the center. In mild climates, the foliage stays green and attractive through the cold months, giving the container continued visual presence when most other plants have died back completely. Next is the vertical accent plant that container designers have quietly relied on for years, and it handles heat and temperature stress far better than it looks. Plant 14. Veronica spicata, also called spike speedwell. Zones 3 through 8. Veronica spicata is the plant that makes surrounding containers look more deliberate and designed simply by being in them. The tapering flower spikes in blue, purple, pink, and white rise sharply above compact foliage mounds and create strong, upright form that gives a mixed container arrangement a sense of intention. Blue carpet and royal candles are the best choices for containers, compact enough to stay proportional in a 12 to 16-inch pot, while producing flower spikes tall enough to create genuine visual drama. Bloom time runs from early to midsummer, with a reliable re-bloom after spent spikes are removed. The underreported headline feature is thermal tolerance. Containers warm and cool far more dramatically than the ground as ambient temperatures shift. Most plants feel that stress. Veronica handles heat, periods of dryness, and the temperature fluctuations of container life far better than its delicate appearance suggests. It is significantly more reliable in pots than most gardeners expect. Next is the surprise entry, a plant famous for being invasive in garden beds that becomes perfectly behaved the moment you put it in a container. Plant 15. Crocosmia. Zones 5 through 9. This is the one that surprises experienced gardeners. Crocosmia, particularly the Lucifer variety with its intensely saturated red-orange arching sprays, is known in garden beds for its spreading, almost invasive habit. Gardeners plant it once and spend years managing how far it travels. In a container, that vigor is completely contained. The corm-based root system fills the pot, blooms magnificently in mid to late summer, with arching stems carrying dozens of small tubular flowers, and stays exactly where you put it. The container solves Crocosmia's only real problem while keeping everything that makes it spectacular. The arching stems bend gracefully outward from the center and create a fountain effect in a container that looks like it belongs in a professional cut flower garden. Leave the seed head standing through winter for bird food and structural interest. Divide the corms every 3 to 4 years, and you have free divisions to expand your container collection at no cost. Next is the deepest shade solution on this list: silver foliage that lights up dark spaces and one of the earliest blooms of the entire gardening year. Plant 16. Pulmonaria, also called lungwort, zones 3 through 8. If you have a deep shade container problem and have not found a solution that delivers both genuine beauty and low maintenance, this is the plant. Pulmonaria thrives in full shade and returns reliably year after year. The leaves are often heavily spotted or splashed with silver, some varieties appearing almost entirely silver from a distance, which lights up dark container displays in a way that green foliage simply cannot. In early spring, before the foliage has fully emerged, clusters of small tubular flowers appear in pink, purple, blue, or white. It is one of the earliest perennial bloomers in the gardening year. Trevi Fountain, Raspberry Splash, and Diana Clare are the varieties with the most striking foliage. In a container with good drainage, Pulmonaria also avoids the powdery mildew on the foliage that can affect in-ground plants in humid conditions. A north-facing porch, a shaded courtyard, a spot under a tree canopy. Pulmonaria does not just survive there, it performs. Next is the final reveal. The one plant on this list that handles full shade, dry soil, extreme heat, and months of neglect and still delivers. Plant 17. Liriope, also called lily turf. Zones 5 through 10. This is the plant that will permanently change how you think about containers in the most challenging growing conditions: full shade, dry soil, root competition from nearby trees, extreme summer heat, months of neglect. Liriope handles all of it without complaint, without dying back, and without losing the dense grass-like foliage that makes it one of the best structural container plants available. The silvery sunproof and big blue varieties produce spikes of lavender to violet flowers in late summer that emerge directly from the foliage, followed by small black berries that persist through winter and attract birds. Variegated varieties with cream-edged or gold-striped leaves provide year-round foliage interest that requires zero maintenance to sustain. Here is what this plant proves. Most gardeners search for low-maintenance container plants expecting to compromise on beauty or impact. Liriope makes no such demand. By year 3, it is dense, architectural, flowering, berry-producing, and completely self-sufficient. It asks for nothing and delivers everything. Next is the plant bees cannot leave alone, blooming from late spring until frost with almost no effort from you. Plant 18. Catmint, also called nepeta. Zones 3 through 8. If pollinator value is important to your garden, no plant on this list delivers it more consistently than catmint. The lavender blue flower spikes bloom continuously from late spring until frost, drawing bees in numbers that make the container genuinely dynamic from across the yard. Walker's Low is the variety to grow for containers, mounding, fragrant, and proportional enough to work in pots of almost any size. Deer avoid it entirely. After the first heavy bloom flush, cut the plant back by half, and it comes back with a strong second flush that carries the pollinator value deep into the season. Drought tolerance is strong once established, making it well suited to container conditions. And unlike most plants with ornamental value, catmint also delivers fragrance. The foliage releases a clean, herbal scent when touched that adds a sensory layer to patio and deck containers that most gardening content never mentions. Next is the perennial that saves your container display when everything else begins to fade and quietly produces free plants for next season while it does it. Plant 19. Rudbeckia, also called Black-Eyed Susan. Zones 3 through 9. Most container gardens peak in early summer and begin looking tired by late July. Rudbeckia solves that problem precisely. The golden yellow flowers with dark centers do not appear until late summer and continue through fall, carrying the display long after most other perennials have finished. Goldsturm is the variety to choose for containers: compact, prolific, and consistently reliable. The self-seeding behavior is a genuine bonus. Rudbeckia seeds itself gently enough to produce free plants in nearby containers or garden beds without becoming invasive. It is the garden's way of thanking you for not deadheading. Leave the seed heads standing through winter. This is the third plant on this list that feeds birds through the cold months: Echinacea, Crocosmia, and now Rudbeckia. Together they create a winter wildlife system built entirely from a container planting. Pair Rudbeckia with ornamental grasses for a late-season container composition that looks completely intentional with zero design effort. The final plant on this list is the shade-loving showstopper most gardeners have never considered putting in a pot. Plant 20. Astilbe. Zones 3 through 8. Most gardeners know Astilbe from shaded garden borders. Almost nobody thinks to put it in a container, and that is exactly what makes it the right plant to close this list. In full shade to partial shade, Astilbe produces feathery plumes in white, pink, red, and deep purple that look like nothing else in the container garden. Fanal and Visions are the two varieties that perform best in pots: compact, reliable, and generous with their bloom. The one honest trade-off is moisture. Astilbe is the single plant on this list that needs consistent watering rather than drought tolerance. But in a container where water delivery is simple and direct, that requirement is easy to meet, and the visual payoff justifies it completely. After blooming, the plumes dry in place and hold their structure through winter, adding architectural interest to the container long after the growing season ends. Pair Astilbe with Heuchera and Pulmonaria, and you have a complete shade container system that delivers foliage color, early spring flowers, and dramatic summer plumes from 3 plants that together ask for almost nothing. That is all 20 plants. Now let us look at what they actually build together. These 20 plants are not a random list. They are a complete seasonal system. Spring opens with creeping phlox, Pulmonaria, and dianthus delivering color before almost anything else in the garden has woken up. Summer peaks with Echinacea, Agapanthus, Crocosmia, Penstemon, and Catmint carrying the display through the longest, hottest months. Fall belongs to Sedum, Rudbeckia, Liriope, and ornamental grasses, holding color and structure through the first frost while everything else gives up. And winter is not empty. Dried seed heads from Echinacea, Yarrow, Crocosmia, and Rudbeckia feed birds and provide architectural interest through the coldest months. Pollinator value stacks across every season. Bees arrive with catmint and salvia in late spring. Hummingbirds follow with penstemon through summer, and butterflies work the Echinacea and Rudbeckia through fall. And here is what the annual replanting model never gives you. Maintenance drops every year. A perennial container in year 3 requires a fraction of the attention it needed in year 1. The investment compounds, the beauty increases, the work decreases. So where do you actually start? Begin with lavender, sedum, and echinacea. All 3 are drought tolerant, zone flexible from zones 3 through 9, and nearly indestructible in their first season. They establish quickly, ask very little, and deliver enough visual reward to keep you motivated while the system builds. Once those 3 are settled, add Heuchera and Salvia nemorosa. Heuchera brings all-season foliage color into low-light spots. Salvia nemorosa brings pollinators and a second bloom flush built right into its maintenance routine. Hold off on Agapanthus and Crocosmia until you are confident in your zone and your pot sizing. Both are spectacular but have specific requirements that matter more once you understand your growing conditions. 2 mistakes to avoid early. First, choosing plants for 1 season instead of 3. Every container should have spring value, summer value, and fall structure before you consider it complete. Second, repotting perennials too soon. Disturbing the root system in the first year delays establishment and resets the compounding process you are trying to build. And before any purchase, check your USDA hardiness zone. Zone-appropriate selection is the single most important decision you make. Here is what this entire video is really about. Container gardening does not have to be a cycle of planting, spending, replacing, and starting over every spring. That cycle exists because the wrong plants were normalized and nobody offered an alternative system. The 20 plants in this video are the alternative. They do not ask for daily attention. They do not need replacing every season. They build resilience year after year, feed pollinators across every season, deliver curb appeal without a design budget, and compound in beauty the longer you leave them in place. This is not about working harder in your garden. It is about building something that works harder for you. A container planted with the right perennials today becomes a self-sufficient, wildlife-supporting, beautiful landscape feature by year 3, at zero replacement cost and a fraction of the maintenance time. Stop planting for one season. Start planting for years. Now I want to hear from you. Which plant on this list surprised you most? Which one are you adding to your containers first? Drop your hardiness zone in the comments and tell me what container challenge you are trying to solve. I read every single one. If this gave you a new way to think about container gardening, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more gardeners who are tired of replanting every spring. Subscribe if you want practical, perennial first gardening content delivered regularly. Keep growing. I will see you in the next one.